let's speak a little bit about Imam Malik because I want to introduce him as a personality, and we can then go on to taking some of you live. The legend, people, of Imam Malik ibn Anas. Allah. Let me just leave that up there. And I'll just see. Because there's so much to say, I did think to myself, I'll just make some little tiny bullet points so I don't forget. Because about Imam Malik, we have to really do multiple sessions. We can always come back to the Imam because there's just so much about him. Right, so, oh, damn, what have I just done? Okay, so let's start off with a brief introduction. Imam Malik, his name, Malik ibn Anas ibn Malik ibn Abi Amir al-Asbahi. Okay, now he is born in Medina in 92 or 93 Hijri, so that's about 83 years after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He is of Arab origin, as you'd imagine. He's from a tribe known as Dhu Asbah. Al-Asbahi, he's called, Malik ibn Anas al-Asbahi. Very famous Himyari tribe, and the Himyar are a well-known branch, if you like, of the Qahtaniyin. They were involved in many dynastic kind of mini, maybe not empires, but small scale civilizations in southern Arabia pre-Islam. So there's a lot of history to the Himyarites, and you can check that up, and maybe we'll cover that in another day. They are more from Qahtan. And I have got a mind trap where I discuss the Arab lineage and stuff. And there is this huge thing on a side note: what is Qahtan and what is Adnan? And maybe a lot of this is reshaped and reformed post-Islam, especially what the Qahtaniyin meant. And so people call the Qahtaniyin al-Arab al-Ariba, and they call the Adnaniyin al-Arab al-Musta'ariba, and that they are from Ismail alayhi salam. But then you get many people, like right from the Sahaba, transmit Ibn Umar, Abu Huraira. You'll get these people saying, no, the Qahtan is from Ismail alayhi salam. They use this hadith. The Prophet said, Ya Bani Ismail, irmu fa inna abakum kana ramya. So they use this. Ibn Hazm goes with that. Ibn Abdul Bar goes with that. There's Imam Bukhari goes with that. You get, what's his name? What's his name? Zubayr ibn Bakar, or it's on the tip of my tongue. He goes with that. A lot of these people seem to, but then as Islam progresses, they seem to say, no, well, actually, the Qahtaniyin was separate and these people were separate. And there wasn't really any, there isn't much archaeological evidence to support the whole Qahtani thing. There was something that was found that said Qahtan, and it wasn't really sure whether Qahtan was it describing a region, a settlement, or a people. But anyway, I digress. Let's get back to the topic. So Imam Malik ibn Anas, Ibn Malik, and this Anas ibn Malik is not the Sahaba Anas ibn Malik, it's just his. So Malik ibn Anas ibn Malik. So his granddad is called Malik as well. Ibn Abi Amir al-Asbahi. Abu Amir is a companion of the Prophet who witnessed several battles with the Prophet as well. So he was that close with the Prophet, Abu Amir al-Asbahi. His son Malik, who's Imam Malik's granddad, was from the Tabi'een. He was somebody that was played or had a presence in Medina amongst the Muslims. He is one of the few people who prays over Uthman when he is murdered. So this is how. So this is the kind of lineage that we're dealing with. that you've got, wow, these people have played such a role in Islam. And Imam Malik's father, Anas, they say Imam Malik does transmit a hadith from him, so he may have had some small presence in the Islamic tradition, but not much. His brother, so Imam Malik's uncle Abu Suhail, is known for transmitting hadith, and Imam Malik does transmit from his uncle Abu Suhail. So this is the family, his father Anas, his wife, Imam Malik's mother, is Aliya. She gives birth to, right, so his birth as well has some miraculous story to it, as many superheroes do. So many people transmit from Imam Malik him saying that, oh, they told me, obviously, like he says, my relatives and elders told me that my mother was pregnant for 3 or 4 years with me. Now, this is an interesting point because it goes back to, once again, this discussion we'd had before about how do we approach Islam and science. So Imam Malik, he says, well, look, this is what people said. So you wouldn't really know any different, because you would just know that, look, most people have a baby within, let's say, 8 to 9 months. This is how you would know the average. Maybe some people have to survive given their environment. Now, okay, many women claimed to be pregnant for several years, the gestation period. Now, how do we explain this? Because we know that's impossible. So once again, we don't take this. We don't take a dogmatic view. Well, because these people said it, it must be true. But at the same time, we're not saying these people were lying, because that's not what they don't get anything out of lying about this. And it's not that they were ignorant about time. They don't understand what 1 year is or 3 years are. So research in recent times has shown, and several Muslim researchers and medical researchers have researched what they call phantom pregnancies. And there's a great Saudi medical researcher who's done a lot of work on this, and he's done multiple conferences, and he's been to these remote, almost Bedouin-like settlements of Arabs, and spoken to them, where they still have these myths that where some people feel that such and such woman has been pregnant for 2 years. And it's interesting, the kind of ethnographic studies that have now been conducted, and they shed light. So in a phantom pregnancy, what happens is a woman, and this might come into Matt Walsh's What is a Woman? But a woman takes on the symptoms of pregnancy. So she feels some sickness, with irregularities of discharge and a cessation or a lack of menstrual cycles. She develops a bloating in the lower abdomen region, and not just the kind of lower gut around what would be the womb. It gets bloated. Now, the signs are that she's pregnant. So people, especially given an absence of pregnancy test checks and stuff like this, so the women in the village or in the nomadic settlement would say, oh, well, she's pregnant. She's throwing up. She hasn't had her period. She's late. Therefore, she's pregnant. And what would happen is, this is not a pregnancy. Now, whatever it is, there's an abnormality that has resulted in a bloatingness around the womb region, which is tied in with why she's not having any menstruation. And this has also resulted in an internal hormonal physiological presence, which has made her sick, has made her hormonal, has made her, so she thinks she's going through a pregnancy, but it doesn't continue to, it just has some bloating that it is perceptible, but it doesn't seem to grow beyond that. It doesn't grow into like a full, fetus pregnancy. So people assume she is pregnant. And she just stays like that for months and months, and sometimes a year, sometimes 2 years. Now, given modern medicine and technology, and we would clearly know this woman is not pregnant, and if she was to resort to medical assistance, she would be given the aid that would then restore her to the homeostasis that she should be at. But now, minus that, and the social narrative that she is pregnant, she assumes she's pregnant. And what happens during this time, sometimes some of these women actually become pregnant. So now the pregnancy does start to develop. So let's say in the second year or in the third year, it now starts to grow more and more and more, and then she has a baby. So people around her don't count the pregnancy they count it from the beginning of the phantom pregnancy. And they say, well, they say that I was just reading, women actually give positive pregnancy tests, hormonal issue. Oh, shukran. So this is where you get in the past, in some of the books where the scholars don't know that long ago. They're just going by science of the age. It's like when Imam Malik is asked about postnatal bleedings, or asked about menstrual cycles, and he just says, look, you just ask the women of your region, because you would be an extension of them ethnically and so on, and you'd be similar to them. So because they don't know, what are they going to say? Is it, some people say 60 days, it's 40 days, it's this. He just says, look, just ask the women what is it. And they'll give you an average, so you just go with that. So so this was the birth of Imam Malik. As a young child, he was born and raised in Medina. His family were religious, but they had some freedoms, as they did. They weren't draconian towards him. So he grew up very just chilled out. And he wasn't actually that religious growing up as a kid, Imam Malik. He was very drawn to music and singing. And so he, as a young man, as a young boy, let's say, so he wanted to become a singer. And he would kind of sing and he would do stuff, and he was just more interested in that. So he did, like many young boys then, he wore an earring. This comes as a surprise to many people today. They think, because I guess the Muslim culture changed over time. So then as Islam spread out and the cultures changed, many people stopped wearing, like they wouldn't wear earrings. And so they would think this is only girls wear earrings. But many of the great Imams in the early Islamic period, especially in Arabia, the great muhaddithin, like Imam Malik, like Sufyan ibn Uyayna, like all these people used to wear earrings. Sufyan ibn Uyayna used to wear his earrings into his hadith dars, where he would learn hadith. So there were people later on, as they became older men, they stopped wearing them. But they weren't, it wasn't that they, see, now the question is, people, see, this is the question where people say, oh my God, well, how could that be? Because it becomes as a shock, because they think it's haram for men to wear earrings. And this is why Imam Malik's fatwa in the Bayan wa Tahsil by Ibn Rushd, expanding on the Utbiyah, is that when he says to make your young boys wear golden earrings is makruh. He doesn't comment on the earring. He says because gold shouldn't, he says it's better to refrain from gold. So he said that it's makruh, but not about the earring. He doesn't say anything, because if it's about the earring, then he ought to say, well, wait a minute, earrings are wrong. like, so for example, if let's say owning a gun is, let's say it's forbidden or it's illegal, and let's say if we're using those terms, and if a person says, well, what if I owned a golden gun? And the person ought to say, well, guns altogether, or giving that example. So when Imam Malik is asked that about people placing golden earrings on boys, young boys, he says that, well, he says that gold is not something that really, he goes with the general understanding that it's makruh. He says that this is discouraged because they shouldn't really make them wear gold, and he says even though the boys, they're just young boys, but the parents should know better. But he doesn't criticize the earring, because in his day and age most boys had earrings. And this is why also the Shia tradition show about the grandsons of the Prophet ﷺ with earrings in their riwayat, when they speak of Karbala and things like this, that how the earrings were dangling and things like that. But I've got a very detailed video about that. But it comes as a culture shock, and I get that, because people think, oh my God, how that's not the Islam that we're so perceptibly familiar with. But that's very common, because the Salaf were very early in Islam, so their Islam culture hadn't formed clearly, or it was still developing, it hadn't solidified. So if you read about the Salaf, a lot of them, for example, had things like, the men had ponytails or they had braids. Many of the men would braid their hair, have like these kind of plaits. This, as you can imagine, even today, if you saw a man in much of the Muslim world, would be really frowned upon. But arguably, they say in Sahih Bukhari, the Prophet had plaits. Not always, but some in the Riwayah in Bukhari, they say he plaited 4 main plaits and tied them. But today, this is, because it's not the common culture, it comes as a culture shock. So this was Imam Malik's upbringing. He was very into music. He was very into singing. He was not interested in Islam as much. It doesn't mean he was against Islam. He just wasn't drawn that way. And he asked his mother discouraged him from his mother. It's Allah. See your destiny. Determine your destiny. And his mother gave him that direction. And she said to him that, look at the wisdom. She didn't say to him to discourage him, what the hell are you doing? This is this is wrong. And she said to him that, but look, you look at the culture at large. So Imam Malik, for people who don't know, he was blonde. Imam Malik was blonde with blue eyes. He wasn't like dark-haired and dark-eyed. He was white. And so why was he white with blonde hair and blue eyes? And this is obviously something coming in his lineage. And that's a different discussion. How did that get there? Is a discussion for, a more Arab lineage, because there were some Arabs that were like that. Now, people may say, well, that origin somehow came with some, whatever it was, I don't know, but there were certain Arabs like that, and Imam Malik was amongst them. He was known as Azraq. He had blue eyes, and he has Ashqar, had blonde hair. And so his mom said to him that, look, come on, you'll never, it just won't fly. Your project won't take off, because people, who's going to come to watch you perform? Talk about letting him down slowly. His mom goes, yeah, who's going to come to watch the Gora? This Gora. She goes, look, come on, let's be real. It's not, nobody's going to, you're not going to get it's not going to work. You're blonde, you're blue-eyed, you're this, in Arabia, it's, come on. So he was a bit disheartened. His mom had foresight, though. She said to him, look, why don't you put your mind to some academic study? Sure, you're gifted in music and stuff like this. But what about, and here Imam Malik thought, okay then. And little did he know that this choice of his was to immortalize him forever in Islamic history. That his thinking, his understanding and interpretation of Islam was to go on to shape Islamic civilizations to our very age. I mean, that choice right there between should I become a musician or should I Allah, it's never too late. Huh? So his mum encouraged him and he listened. His elder brother was quite academic Islamically, and his brother's name was Nadar. And this is how Imam Malik would be known as Akhun Nadar. He's Nadar's brother. And because his brother was academic, but Imam Malik was just more of a chill, into music, into this. But when he did come onto, he put his mind to it and his heart, and he was really, Allah opened the path before him that it got to such an extent that his people around him, his family, his parents, his brother, everybody eventually came to be known through him. That's the father of Malik. Oh, that's the brother of Malik. Oh, it's wow. What, we don't, this is the thing, that what was it that fattaqullah, that have this mindfulness of wattaqullah wa yu'allimukum Allah, and Allah will, from his gems, he will teach you things that you do not believe or can imagine that you will know. So this journey began of Imam Malik. He had some great teachers, Ibn Shihabuddin al-Zuhri. He had teachers Ibn Hurmuz. He had Abu Zinad. He had Rabi'atul Ra'i. Rabi'atul Ra'i was one of the major teachers that would always emphasize to him this Amalu Ahlil Medina, the way of the people of Medina. It was a very famous statement of Rabi'atul Ra'i that Malik would continue to utter throughout his life. That alfun an alfin, that 1,000 from 1,000, ahabbu ilayya min wahid an wahid, is more beloved to me than this one-on-one. فَإِنَّ الْوَاحِدَ عَنْ وَاحِدٍ, in surely the one-on-one, سَيَنْزِعُ الدِّينَ مِنْ بَيْنِ يَدَيْهِ, will snatch the deen away from you. What was the one-on-one? The one-on-one was the hadith literature. It's all one-on-one. I heard from who heard from who heard from. Alfun an alf. 1,000 people have picked it, have learnt it from 1,000 people. This was the living tradition in Medina. This is why Amalu Ahl al-Medina is such a powerful concept that not only that perfectly instantiates this debate of hadith versus sunnah. So these were Imam Malik's, his teachers, some of his teachers. He lived in Medina. He was a trader. As he grew up, he got into trade. He was incredibly successful in trade. People said he was a merchant in cloth and things like that. He would have investments come into Medina. He would then trade them in Medina, and he made a lot of money from it. So he was wealthy, and he took to it to spend money as well. He would buy himself expensive suits. He would spend money. He was like very, not only wealthy, but he enjoyed the wealth that Allah had given him. And he took pride in that. He wasn't shy about it. So sometimes we do have a tradition in Islam where people are very, they prefer to almost a hermit kind of, or an asceticism, that to abstain from the dunya. So there is a tradition like that in Islam, but Imam Malik was not from that tradition. He spent money, he enjoyed money, he was known to really, he was particular about his food as well. He would always eat meat. I don't think the vegans would have liked him for that matter. Always on a daily basis, he would eat meat. He said that meat, it helps people maintain a strong posture. I guess protein is what he was talking about. And he said, well, it would keep people strong, and the faith would, if they were people of faith, then people around them felt their presence. And by feeling their presence, the faith had a presence. As in, when they spoke of the deen, it had an awe to it. So he was and he was criticized a lot about this kind of stuff. So he did speak about that. Let me just, I see this has just moved. Yeah, so he did do that. That was his whole attitude. And people used to criticize him that how can you, it's not from, this is indulgence. But he was who he was, the legend, Allah. And he became so committed to the study of hadith and fiqh and learning that he became an imam in his age. In his lifetime, he was so celebrated that people would come to, they knew who he was. They say in Hajj, people would follow, like they would just see what is Malik doing, and they would just imitate that. To the extent they say once, Imam Malik, something, he was sitting in, I think, Mina, and as he's sitting, something, he had this rida, like a cloak, and it got trapped under him. So he stood up and he straightened his thing, and people stood up, and like they're thinking that they were thinking this is the religious act to do at this stage. This is the way that they would copy him. And when it came to matters of the faith, in hadith, he was Amirul Mu'minina fil hadith. He was untouchable in hadith. His chain is considered by Imam Bukhari to be the most strongest chain that exists in hadith literature. It's called the golden chain, al-silsilatu dhahabiyya, Malik an Nafi' an ibn Umar, from the Prophet. So between Malik and the Prophet, there are two people, Nafi' and Ibn Umar, radiallahu. So this is considered the golden chain, which is not, it's in the Muwatta, but it's not the only, as in Imam Malik uses other chains, but that's in there as well. And the Muwatta was one of the earliest compendiums of hadith literature. Imam Malik was not trying to compile hadith as a collective, but what he was doing is putting together a selection. Okay, the Muwatta is arguably the most authentic book in hadith from a hadithi perspective. Okay, it naturally, it predates by some generations the very existence of Imam Bukhari. So, let alone his book, Sahih al-Bukhari. But by Imam Bukhari's own acknowledgement, Imam Malik's chain is nothing. It is the most authentic chain in the entire hadith literature. This is the position of Imam Malik. Why do people not put Imam Malik's book as number one? Because the Malikiyya do, and some other people do, Shah Waliullah Dahlawi and other people do consider the Muwatta to be the most authentic book there is. But why do the Shafi'is or the other people not? The Shafi'i have dominated the hadith literature. Why do they not consider it? Why do the Salafiyya not consider it? Why do and there may be many reasons. amongst them that, well, some people felt, well, it's only a small number of hadith. There's only about 1,800 hadith in there, whereas the other books have, whether it's going to be 7,000, 6,000, 4,000, 10,000, 12,000. And so this is a small collection of hadith, therefore it's not of equal measure. That may be a reason. Another reason is as well that Imam Malik speaks in the Muwatta. And you say, well, what's the problem with him speaking? Doesn't Imam Tirmidhi speaks in his Tirmidhi? He says, well, such and such scholar acted according to this hadith, such and such didn't. He says, well, such and such person is weak, such and such person is sahih. So that's fine. It's not a... Abu Dawood sometimes speaks in his... Imam Bukhari sometimes speaks in his book. So what's the problem with speaking? Well, it's not speaking per se. It's what's being spoken. Imam Malik brings a hadith at times, not always, but he brings a hadith, and then he says, we don't act according to this hadith. He says, هذا الحديث ليس عليه العمل ببلدنا. He says, this hadith, we in our city. And here I ask you, what city? In our city. In the city. In the one that counts. Al-Madinatul Munawwara. In the city of the Prophet. No other city matters. It is just Medina, full stop. So he says, we in our city do not act upon this hadith. This is a catastrophic meteor in the face of the second wave Muhaddithin project. This attitude. So Imam Malik is part of the first wave of where hadith is being developed. Not developed, it is development is the proto stage, but now it's being compiled and written, and they are part and parcel of the hadith project, the first era, first wave. The second wave is the muhaddithin like Bukhari, Abu Dawood, Abu Zur'a, all these people, Tirmidhi, and these people. So in the first wave, Imam Malik has said this. In the second wave, it is all about the hadith project. To bring a hadith and say, well, according in our city, we don't practice this. There's no action. This hadith is not to be actioned in our city. Allah. That's a collision of biblical proportions, people, for the hadith dogmatists. This is why, but then you could say, well, what makes this worse or more complicated is the person who's saying it. See, the person who's saying it is Imam Malik ibn Anas. Allah. You see now, Imam Malik in the Islamic legacy is a force of nature. He is Amirul Mu'minina fil Hadith. And he is Alimu Ahlil Medina. There is a hadith in Tirmidhi that the Prophet said that there will be a time, yushak, that there is almost a time, it's almost here, it's not here, but it's almost here, where people will start to rush to seek knowledge. There will be, like a gold rush. There will be an ilm rush, a knowledge rush. People will come from far distances to seek knowledge. In that time, لا يجدون أعلم من عالم المدينة. In that age, it is not in the Prophet's time, but in that age, they will not find anyone more knowledgeable than the alim of Medina. Shortly after the Sahaba's time, in the Tabi'een time, in the late Tabi'een time, this culture began where people started to travel to seek knowledge. And they say there was never, in such an era, there were either, let's say just shortly before Imam Malik, many people in Medina. So there was never a scholar that people referred to as the designated scholar of Medina. They were the Fuqaha Sab'ah, for example, who were Imam Malik's teachers. As the poet says, فَخُذْهُمْ عُبَيْدَ اللَّهِ عُرْوَةَ قَاسِمٌ. And so they were these many ulama of Medina. But in Malik's time, which is the same time he's growing up, but as he grows into an older man and they've all passed away, and this era has fully blossomed. People are traveling from Khurasan, people are coming from Uzbekistan, people are coming from Maghrib al-Aqsa, people are coming from Al-Andalus, Muslim Spain, to seek knowledge. In that time, there was only one scholar in Medina, and that was referred to as Alimu Ahl al-Medina. That was Imam Malik. This is why many ulama said, Sufyan ibn Uyayna, Ibn Mahdi, other people said, we understood this hadith to be embodied in Imam Malik. See, this is the status of Malik. When it comes to fiqh din, understanding the deen, it's a don, an unparalleled don, untouchable. When it comes to hadith, he's Amirul Mu'minin. Now, what do you do with a guy like that when he says, oh, this hadith, who's transmitting it? I'm transmitting it. What sanad are you transmitting it with? The golden chain. Nobody can beat this on earth. He says, oh yeah, that hadith. There is no action upon this hadith in our city. Maybe in your city there is, but in our city, the city of the Prophet, we don't act according to that hadith. This was a nuclear fission bomb in the face of the later Hadith Dogmatist project. Therefore, this is perhaps also one of the reasons that Imam Malik's Muwatta is not factored into when they say the 6 major books, because the 6 major books project is a Shafi'i project. It's done by people who belong to the Shafi'i madhab, who were for the most part Hadith Dogmatists. So it was at loggerheads, and you see, it's difficult to criticize Imam Malik. He's very, to criticize him, well, good luck. It's difficult. There's other imams who are soft targets. Every other imam has some apparent vulnerability. Imam Abu Hanifa was not as good in hadith. People criticized him. Imam Shafi'i was not actually as well trained in hadith. People criticized him. He wasn't as reliable. Imam Ahmad was not as trained in the understanding, in the fiqh of the deen. Many scholars did not recognize him as a mujtahid imam. You name the imams, many of them had some weak spot. Malik was one of the few legends of Islam that unanimously everybody held him in awe. But he just had this authority about him. And this is why his madhab, you see, his madhab is built on, his school is built on the amal of Ahlul Medina, the living tradition of Medina. This is why we are not hadith dogmatists, not we who follow the tradition of Medina. His school was known as the School of Medina. We who follow the School of Medina are not hadith dogmatists, hadith relativists, as in we embrace the sunnah. Where the hadith correlates with the sunnah, we embrace it. Where it doesn't, we don't. Hadith is simply it's just a historical data. The sunnah, however, is the teaching of the Prophet in the deen. Hadith is a written document. Some sunnah were documented, Some sunnah were never documented. Some non-sunnah actions were documented. You see, so this is where you appreciate, wow, the wealth that Imam Malik brings to the Islamic legacy by documenting these things. Because if somebody today had tried this, they would have been anathematized, they would have been excommunicated, deemed a kafir, chucked out of Islam. They would have all, but Imam Malik, good luck trying any of that. So, yeah, so this was his, and then his madhab was built on maslahah, which is welfare. So you see his madhab, his fatawa. This is why Imam Malik is Ahlul Ra'i. His teacher was Rabi'atul Ra'i. He's from the people of reason, the voice of reason. He would make exemptions. He would say that even if there is a ruling that has come to us from Islam, if the day and age had a welfare that dictated something, we would derogate from and make an exemption. We would make an exemption and an exception from this ruling, and you call that takhsisun nas bil maslaha in the Maliki usul. So this is why Imam Malik's fatwa are like that, and his madhab is a continuation of that. So another cataclysmic, cosmic meteor in the face of dogmatism, because Imam Malik's madhab was then all about maslahah. Not all about it, but at times, and people disagreed. They even Malikis didn't always agree on things amongst themselves, but this is what it was. And we've got to speak about the madhab on another day, because it's the only madhab of Islam that had so much diversity throughout the globe, from Spain to the Middle East to Central Africa. I mean, that's wow. No madhab did that. No madhab reached that kind of geographical diversity. So yeah, that's about his madhab. But coming back to him, Imam Malik, he, as a person, he spent his early portion of his life learning knowledge. Like he says, his life could have, in hindsight, been divided into three. He spent the first third learning, the second third learning and giving back, and the last third primarily just giving back. And yeah, he was criticized by people for not being seen as someone who was very immersed in worship. So he would not, he would pray his fara'id and his daily prayers, but he wouldn't pray many nafal. You wouldn't see him praying many nafal. You wouldn't see him fasting voluntary fasts. You wouldn't see this kind of worship from him. So he was criticized about this. A very famous incident. But Imam Malik responds by saying, look, somebody says to him, why don't I ever see you praying nafal? Why don't I ever, you indulge in meat and you have expensive clothes and you what is this? This is not Islam. And Imam Malik's reply to him is actually very beautiful. He says that he doesn't diss him. He says, look, I respect what you do. You immerse yourself in worship. But he says, look, kilana ala khair. We are all upon goodness. Khair, you worship. I teach people. I discuss with people. I have religious discussions. I convey the living tradition. I expand on ideas, religious ideas with people. He said, look, we all, he said, it's not that what you are doing is better necessarily than what I'm engaged in. That kilana ala khair, that let us be each to their own. Subulullahi kathira. The paths to God are manifold. And this is once, there's an incident that Imam Malik was sitting there and his student Ibn Wahab was sitting there. And it was almost, the adhan had gone. And Ibn Wahab was He is an Egyptian student. He's from the main Egyptian students from Imam Malik are Abdullah ibn Wahab, Ibn al-Qasim, Ashhab, Ibn Abdul Hakam. These are the main Misriyin students. And they spend decades with Malik, by the way. At least they spend about 2 decades, and Ibn Wahab spends 3 decades with him. So when the adhan goes off, Ibn Wahab closes the book. He was making notes and stuff. He closes the book to get up to pray Nafal. And Imam Malik says to him, Ala Malik. He says, easy there, tiger. Tiger. It's easy. He says, he's not stopping him, but he says, don't be mistaken in assuming that what you're going to do is somehow better than what you were doing. See, those who know it can understand it, that there is something about the legacy, about being devoted to learning, that don't underestimate its value. Don't think somehow going towards nafal is somehow more valuable in the eyes of God than this. Sure, if you want to do it, do it. He's not stopping him. But yeah, so this was his lifestyle. He had such, one thing about Imam Malik is he had this bewildering love for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That he would not tolerate any disrespect towards the Prophet. And this isn't about a kind of intolerance. This was his love. He just felt once somebody cracked a joke about something about the Prophet's cloak, and Imam Malik reprimanded him that, look, don't, this to us, he said, this is the most beloved of people. Like, why are you doing that? How could you think that would be funny to us? He declared in Islam that Medina, because it's the resting place of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it is the most afdalu buq'atin fil ard. It is the most virtuous place on earth above Mecca. And such it is in the Maliki madhab. We consider Medina to be more virtuous than Mecca. The other madhabs disagree, but the Maliki madhab holds Medina to be the most virtuous place. So, and Imam Malik never left Medina ever. On one occasion, he went for Hajj, and that was it. He said that I refuse to leave the city of the Prophet for anything, even trade. He had people working for him. He had intermediaries that would bring goods and stock, and he would have it traded in Medina, but he would never leave Medina. He was asked about that, and he said that it's not that I haven't considered it, but he says that I always think that I want Medina to be my final resting place. And what if death is to reach me somewhere else? Allah. See, that's another kind of love that he had for the Prophet. And this is why his madhab was the most strict when it came to matters of loving the Prophet. It was not about a kind of barbarism or anything like this. It was a love. That's what it was. Imam Malik himself never wore shoes in Medina. In the streets of Medina. He would wear it around his, let's say, in his own building, in his home and things like this. But around the masjid and those places, he would take his shoes off. No, I don't mean in the mosque. I mean the streets surrounding that area, that vicinity and so on, because they'd slightly built a bit more by Imam Malik's time. So in those outskirt places, fine. But as he got closer, the vicinity and the streets and the areas, he said that this is certainly where the Prophet walked. So he said that I find it just out of his love. This is not an Islamic ruling. He said that this is where the Prophet set foot. So I find it just in myself unacceptable to wear shoes. Not that he didn't object to people doing that. he refused to ride a horse or a mule or a donkey or anything in those parts of Medina, out of love for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is why, well, when they tried to torture him, they tried to punish him. So later on, Imam Malik gets into some, not trouble, but there's a revolution going on, and Muhammad Nafzakiya's revolution, and we could speak about that another day. And Imam Malik, he's not fond of revolutions, but he implicitly lends some support, because people say, well, look, they say, well, is it permissible? We want to support the revolution, but we have already pledged our allegiance to the Abbasi Caliph at the time, Abu Ja'far al-Mansur. And is it haram then? And then people had said to them, well, were you happy when you pledged your allegiance? And they said, well, we weren't really happy about it. We were somewhat coerced. We had no choice. And they asked Imam Malik, can you give a ruling? And Imam Malik, he wasn't political. He didn't want to get involved, but he understood their quandary and their dilemma. So he said, look, talaqul mukra laysa bitalaq. He said the talaq of a person who is coerced is not a talaq. Make of that what you will. And then he transmitted it as a hadith, which is a hadith. From who? From Ibn Abbas. And who are the rulers? Abbas. Like a double slap. And they said to Imam Malik, you're not allowed to transmit. You got to stop transmitting this hadith. That the divorce of a coerced person is not a divorce. And Malik said, but why not? He said, if you ask me to not get involved in things, sure, but to not transmit the words of the Prophet. He said, who do you think you are? He said, tum kya tumhara baap bhi nahi ho sakta. How can you, the audacity to say do not transmit the words of the Prophet? And on purpose, Imam Malik transmitted this chain. He used the chain going through Ibn Abbas to say that, look, for your greed, you built this caliphate on the back of Ibn Abbas, and his teaching of the Prophet today you will sabotage for your greed. Let that be a lesson to you. Let you drop your head and hang your head in shame. And what they did is they beat Imam Malik for that. And one of the punishments they did is they made him sit on a donkey and ride that donkey in Medina. And Imam Malik would never ride a beast or a donkey or a horse or a mule inside Medina, in the inner part of Medina. And they made him do it, as in they tied him up and put him on this donkey, and just as a kind of humiliation. But honor and humiliation is ultimately from Allah. تُعِزُّ مَن تَشَاءُ وَتُذِلُّ مَن تَشَاءُ. Today, look at the name of Imam Malik. Where are those Abbasi caliphs and those governors that try to humiliate him? They apologized later on. They tried to apologize to him and say that, Imam Malik said, look, I don't hold no grudges. What's happened is happened. They whipped him publicly. They beat him severely publicly, and he stood. He took it. He never. And then he just kind of kept himself to himself. See, the thing was, Imam Malik didn't like the politics, he didn't like the bureaucracy, even regular things. People get shocked that Imam Malik, for the last 25 years of his life, didn't even attend the local masjid. He did used to teach, though, at home, but he just didn't. Now, people say, well, why didn't he attend the masjid? Why didn't he? And then this disturbs them, you see, because they have and say, well, maybe it's because he was sick. Maybe, but he could teach at home. But it seems that when he was asked about this in one of the narrations, he just says that, look, he says, I don't want to see something that irritates me, because then I can't help but speak. And if I speak, I'm going to create problems. You know what? Jao yaar, you guys live your life. I'm going to live my life. And that's what it seems to be. Some people say maybe it was because his health was really bad after the beating. And I doubt it. I mean, it could be, but then he used to teach at home. He continued to teach up until he dedicated so much time to teaching. So it's not like people say, oh, he couldn't control he had incontinence, couldn't control his urine. If that was the case, how was he teaching hadith at home for hours upon hours? He would teach fatwa, he would teach all these things right up until his dying breath. So to me, it doesn't seem that, but sure, people could say that. And he was one of the things that he had this integrity about teaching. And he did used to say, and this, it made me think as well. I came across this recently and I thought, yeah, I have to start again, Imam Malik, he said that anybody who's learned something, he said, whatever happens, never give up teaching. He says, no matter, where and how you find yourself in life, never let go of the path of teaching. Yeah, I came across this recently, I came across it again recently, and I thought, I have to teach again. There is something about the legacy. أسامي لم تزده معرفة إنما لذة ذكرنا. Allah, as the poet says, that these are titles and these are words. They don't increase them in any kind of value. إنما لذة ذكرنا. We mention it because it gives us a ladha, it gives us a pleasure, an enjoyment. But I will continue more about Imam Malik. But what we can see is there was this man who, as a young boy, he chose a path that determined his destiny. And he struggled along the way as well. He met, like all of us, we will meet our challenges. But he gave us a lamp in the darkness, because what he did is, what we see, why is it important, is he showed us that you can understand the deen in this way, that there is this maslaha, welfare, that there is this hadith relativism, that there is a difference between hadith and sunnah, that there is that the sharia has maqasid, that this is how you can do. He taught us that. And the person he was, his teachings they can't just be ignored, as in, you couldn't just, it's not easy to just say, well, it's just Imam Malik. He's a legend in Islam. So I find myself, so it has been one of the joys of learning the legacy of Islam, has been this affiliation to the school of Medina, that I found myself, honestly, in harmony with this school, that whenever I had a way of, let's say, without knowing what things would be, or what do I think Islam would say based on my understanding, often my answer was in line with the school of Medina, that there was such a harmony. So yeah, and it's fascinating that there were certain verses he would often repeat. One was like Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakil. Often found Imam Malik saying that Hasbunallah, Allah is sufficient for us. Wa ni'mal wakil. You know, we got to rely on people. Let's rely on God. Let's rely on God. Why not? Honestly, sometimes we are going to ask people for things. Let's ask Allah. Just ask God. Let's see what happens, man. And there's another verse that he would often repeat, that inna dhunnu illa dhannan wa ma nahnu bimustayqinin. That at best all we have is conjecture, and we lack certainty in this affair. Wow. Inna dhunnu illa dhannan. That we only but think, that all we can bring to this table is but an assumption. وَمَا نَحْنُ بِمُسْتَيْقِنِينَ. We don't have yaqeen in the matter. That's huge, man. That's huge, because let that be a reminder. We, in this day and age, people, they freak out if somebody says, well, I think this is the answer. I feel that this is, oh, no, you should say, I get it, the people want certainty. They want certainty. But this realm, this whole existence is dhan. The ultimate certainty is just Allah. We have to understand that whatever we think is an answer is ultimately our understanding of what we think is the answer. You see, whatever we see and understand is limited by our understanding. And if we're hearing it from someone, it's limited by their understanding. And if they heard it from someone, it's limited by their understanding. So it is ultimately inna dhunnu illa dhannan wa ma nahnu bimustayqinin. Imam Malik would often recite that when teaching people, when giving them answers about the deen. He'd say inna dhunnu illa dhannan wa ma nahnu bimustayqinin. And he left us a very rich tradition, the school of Medina. He left us his book, the Muwatta. It is more a collection of hadith, a small collection, about 1800 hadith. His children, he had 3 children, I believe. He had 2 boys, 1 girl, Muhammad, Yahya, and Fatima. And what many people may not know, it was actually his daughter that took the lamp of his legacy and marched forward with it. She continued to teach his classes and things after him. She was the one that was the most bright. And his son, I forget, I believe it was, might have been Yahya, or was it Muhammad? But his sons were just, one of his sons was just barely okay. He was never impressed with his sons. He really was fascinated with his daughter, as in he felt that she was so intelligent and she was so academically bright that she'd memorized all the hadith and she would teach. And often in his class, she would be sitting in a different part of the house, but they had sometimes like a curtain, and she would be doing some household stuff. But if she heard some of the students sitting with Malik make a mistake in the hadith thing, she would correct it from the other side. She would say what it was. She would say that such and such made somebody made a mistake. This is how it is. Allah. And his sons, Imam Malik, they never took his place. and one of them he was quite disappointed. One of them, I think it was Yahya, it might have been Muhammad. He wasn't interested at all in the legacy, and he would often walk through the house whilst Imam Malik's class was going on. He just had an earring on. He would drag his cloth. You know how back then you weren't meant to, it was frowned upon to drag your kind of garment behind you, the izar. He would often be doing that. And he would have a falcon. And he would, what is a falcon? Yeah, falcon or hawk. And he would often be playing with, he would really loved falconry, and so he would be just playing with that, and so he'd come through the house with it, just and then some of the people would be like, "Oh, that's Imam Malik's son." Imam Malik would just be like, Imam Malik would just say to them that, well, let's praise God who did not allow knowledge to be something that could simply be inherited. See, that's a really fast. Look how Imam Malik saw that. He didn't see, even though he may have felt some disappointment, but in that disappointment, he saw the positive. That, wow, that look at the value Allah left, that this is something that one must struggle for, to determine their own destiny in it. It is not something that you could simply inherit. Allah, that is wow. Even in that, he saw it as a positive reminder. So people, let's wrap up with that on the legacy of the legend Imam Malik.